dear friends, distinguished guests, dear compatriots. I'm very happy to be with you tonight and to share with you some ideas about Serbia's role in the First World War. We are today faced with many attempts of revision of history in order to refocus the responsibility of the outbreak of the First World War, not to Austria-Hungary and Germany, which is beyond any doubt, but to Serbia and Russia, who stood behind her. I think that all these attempts, scholarly, pseudo-scholarly, or others, are something that will burden us in the years to come. But we have to be sure that there is no way that we can accept any responsibility of Serbia for the outbreak of the First World War. At that time, in 1914, Serbia was a small, landlocked Balkan state, unable to protect its compatriots in Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary was the main enemy of Serbia, wanted to expand further in the Balkans and to make Serbia an obedient colony, as it was the case with Bosnia and Herzegovina since 1878. Of course, Serbia was a sovereign state, a sovereign nation, proud and successful. We should note that in 1912 and 1913, Serbia has achieved spectacular victories in the both Balkan wars, and that she became a kind of a regional power, almost doubling the size of its territory. This was, of course, a threat to the multi-ethnic empire such as Austria-Hungary, who wanted to dominate the whole of Balkans, as they did in the previous decades. This is why she was planning since 1908 to attack Serbia, and there were 25 plans to prepare the gear against Serbia as well. The architect of all this policy was Chief of Staff Konrad von Hetzendorf, an Austro-Hungarian general who was keen to see Serbia destroyed and partitioned between Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and after 1912 with Albania as well. You can imagine how difficult was the situation for small Serbia with roughly 4.2 million inhabitants in 1914 when she received the ultimatum from Vienna. An empire of almost 50 million inhabitants with a huge army and enormous resources. Serbia was herself totally exhausted by the Balkan Wars. The costs of these wars were more than a billion French francs. Half of the army was recovering in the hospitals, and many war material was missing. The alleged responsibility of Serbia for the First World War comes due to the Young Bosnia, an organization of national revolutionaries from occupied provinces of Bosnia and Herzegovina who were illegally annexed to Austria-Hungary in 1908, which provoked huge discontent not only among Serbs, who were half of the population, roughly half of the population in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but also with other population in the provinces such as Bosnian Muslims who were still loyal to the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, logistic aid given to the young Bosnians in Belgrade, but the remnants of the former clandestine military organization known as the Black Hand, actually the real name was Unification or Death, led by charismatic Lieutenant Colonel Dragutin Dimitrievich Apis, was something beyond the knowledge of the Serbian government, and it was done without knowledge of the General Staff itself, where Apis was head of the intelligence section. Young Bosnians, Gavrilo Princip, Trifko Grabež, and Nedeljko Čabrinović were just looking a way to get some arms, to get some bombs in order to try this assassination attempt, in order to protest against colonial rule of Austria-Hungary in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It was unimaginable, and in Vienna they didn't understood it well, to build a colony, an African kind of colony in the early 20th century, 600 kilometers from Vienna. And to change the identity of the nations in Bosnia, to change the language, to change the culture, to impose another dialect, and to exploit the riches and the minerals of these two provinces. Therefore, the conflict between the Bosnian Serbs and Austria-Hungary was inevitable. And as we have seen, as I have told you before, Austria-Hungary has already plans in 1907, 25 times, to attack Serbia, waiting for a good pretext. The fateful assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo was a good pretext to start this so-called preventive war against Serbia. However, this time, Austria-Hungary, which always had Germany behind her, Germany with her grandiose plans of world domination and Drang-nach-Osten together with Austria-Hungary, was, as in 1908, as in 1912, strongly behind Vienna. However, this time, Imperial Russia, who was a centuries-long protector of Balkan Christians, Orthodox Christians and Slavs in particular, this time she decided to support Serbia and not to allow that Serbia be attacked and destroyed by Austria-Hungary. This is why this conflict became international, and instead of localized war, became a first conflict on the world scale. Of course, Serbia was only a pretext. The real reason for the war was battle for colonies, for domination, for getting more resources, getting richer people in the Western Europe more rich. Nowadays, blaming Serbia it really looks bizarre, because it's, such a small country could never provoke such a large-scale conflict. It was just a pretext, and we should be aware of it. When they call Gavrilo Princip, a young national revolutionary from Bosnia-Herzegovina, a terrorist, it's a terrible mistake. Terrorist is a word which has changed its content during the last century. Terrorist nowadays means someone who is participating in 9/11 attack or who is putting bombs in the supermarkets and shopping malls. The assassination in Sarajevo was a political assassination, which was a revolt, a kind of a personal revolt against colonial rule and occupation. It was meant not to kill Archduke Franz Ferdinand, but by killing one of the highest officials of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, show their contempt and their disagreement with the way the Bosnia and Herzegovina were ruled. What Gavrilo Princip and his friends wanted was a freedom, the same political freedoms that enjoyed other civilized nations in Europe. They never wanted to be a colonial subject of the age-old empire and to be treated like slaves in the Togo or Congo. I think that we, the Serbs, we should be very proud of our role in the First World War. We have shown to the whole world that Serbia is a proud and a sovereign nation, that Serbia knows what means words honor, fatherland, and freedom. And the Serbs fought in this way throughout this bloody war, which started with the two first Allied victories in 1914. And the outcome of the Great War was created the kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. And this was the only way that most, if not all, Serbs live in a single state with ethnically closed and linguistically and culturally closed Croats and Slovene. The common Yugoslav state was also very beneficial for Croats and Slovenes, who would otherwise be partitioned among other powers. But Serbia has paid the biggest price at all. She lost at least 1.2 million inhabitants, both military and civilians, and has suffered enormous economic and infrastructural destruction. However, the First World War will remain in the Serbian memory as one of the moments of glory in our 1,000-year-long history.